Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chili Relleno pancake. That's right, chili rellenos are one of my all-time favorite foods. But done using the traditional method, they are a little bit of a pain in the culo to make. And what follows is my attempt to take all those exact same ingredients and rearrange them into something that gives us almost the exact same final product, but in a more user-friendly way. And for a first attempt, I could not have been happier with how this came out. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the star of the show, the poblano chili pepper, which besides being quite beautiful, are absolutely delicious, and sort of like a green bell pepper, but with a more complex, intense flavor, and definitely a little more heat. Alright, I wouldn't say these are spicy, but they're not completely mild either. And what we're going to do first is place these over an open flame, so we can char the entire surface, which most people think we do so we can remove the skin, which is definitely true. But we're also, and just as importantly, cooking the pepper as well. So just because that skin blackens doesn't mean we're necessarily done. And we really do want to fire roast these until the peppers begin to get soft. Okay, not super soft, but there definitely should be some give when you squeeze them with your tongs. And if you don't have gas burners, you can also use a blowtorch or your grill. Or as I'll explain later, you could just skip this entire step and just slice and saute the peppers. And while that will work practically, what you're going to be missing out on is that beautiful, subtle, smoky flavor, which personally I think is one of the keys. And then what we'll do once those are fully charred and feeling perfect is lay those on top of some paper towels and then roll them up. And then we'll roll and wrap everything up nice and tightly in a kitchen towel, at which point we'll leave those peppers to steam in their own steaminess for at least about 15 or 20 minutes, or until we're ready to work with them. And then what we'll do once that's been accomplished is move on to make our sauce, which for me is going to start with a saucepan set over medium-high heat, into which we've added a little bit of olive oil, and we'll go ahead and toss in some diced onion, as well as some minced garlic, and of course the customary very large pinch of salt. And what we'll do is cook that stirring for a few minutes, or until our onions start to turn translucent, and maybe even begin to take on a little bit of golden color. And then once that's been accomplished, we'll go ahead and add our tomato product, which for me is going to be some marinara. Although traditionally this is usually made with fresh tomatoes, but personally I do prefer the sauce. And then we will also add a little bit of chicken broth, which we can use to wash out our tomato measuring cup. And then we'll go ahead and season this up with some chili powder. Okay, a little bit or a lot, depending on your taste. We will also add some dry oregano, some freshly ground black pepper, some salt of course, as well as the equally predictable few shakes of cayenne. And then we'll finish up with a little bit of ground cumin. And then last but not least, a little touch of cinnamon. And once everything's in there, we'll give it a stir and simply wait for it to come up to a simmer. And I really should stress at this point that this is my version of chili relleno sauce. And in no way am I saying this is the authentic version, which I don't think is even a thing. Alright, just like Italians and spaghetti sauce, there are as many recipes as there are families. So this is going to be up to you to adapt as you see fit. I mean, you are after all the jefe of your sauce. And in case you've never worked in a restaurant, that does mean boss of your sauce. And that's it. Once we get that simmering, we'll simply lower our heat to medium-low, at which point we'll simmer that gently, stirring occasionally for at least 30 minutes. And above and beyond adjusting the seasoning, feel free to add some more broth if you don't want your sauce quite as thick as I like mine. Again, this is all just personal preference, and I've had versions of this that were super thick, whereas other versions were as thin as tomato juice. So basically with this kind of thing, there's the way you do it and the wrong way. And that's it. Once our sauce is simmered long enough, we'll go ahead and give it a taste and adjust those seasonings if need be. And assuming we like it, we will simply reserve it until needed. And obviously if we're making this ahead, we'll want to reheat it before we use it. And now that that's set, we can go back and unwrap our peppers, which no, do not look very good at this point. But they're going to look a whole lot better once we scrape off this burnt skin, which I like to do with the edge of a knife. And then besides the skin, we'll also have to remove the seeds. And since we're going to slice everything up for this method, in hindsight, I could have just torn all this open and cut away the stem and seed pod. But I think what happened was muscle memory took over, since this is how you prep them for the real deal, where the skin and the seeds and the seed pod are removed while leaving the pepper whole, so it can be stuffed with cheese and then battered and fried. So what I'm trying to say is I probably could have done this step a lot faster. And speaking of faster, yes, we could have just taken this pepper to the sink and rinsed off all that burned skin and then the seeds from the inside. But they say if this is under running water too long, you end up losing some of that beautiful, subtle, smoky flavor from the surface. So I try to do as much as I can with the knife, And then I'll just give the inside a little bit of a rinse to get rid of those loose seeds, while trying to avoid having the water run too much on the outside, which at this point is exactly where I went and what I did, although I didn't film it, because who wants to watch someone rinse out seeds from the inside of a pepper? But bottom line, these peppers need to be skinned and seeded, at which point I'm going to go ahead and slice these into strips. And sure, if you have absolutely no way to roast the peppers, you could, if you want, just cut them in half and remove the seeds, and then cut them into strips like this and give them a quick saute in a little bit of olive oil, just until they start to soften. And my plan here was to use 1 pepper per portion, although that's really going to depend on the size of your peppers, of course. And then besides the green chili, we're also going to need to cube up some cheese, which in my case is going to be some Monterey Jack, but I think a mild white cheddar would also work. Or you could even do half and half, which is very nice. All right, you decide. I mean, you are, after all, the Jesus of your cheeses. And that's it. Once that's set, we can move on to the last component, which would be a very, very simple egg batter. And for that, we will crack 1 whole egg into a bowl. But with the second egg, we're actually going to separate it, with the white going into a separate bowl, and then the yolk going into the bowl with the whole egg. And then once those have been separated, we'll toss a big pinch of salt into the bowl with the whole egg and yolk, at which point we will whisk that enthusiastically for a few minutes, until we have a nice light foamy mixture which hopefully looks a little something like this. At which point we're going to whisk in a couple tablespoons of flour and a few additions. Okay, you could probably just dump it all in and whisk it, but I decided to do mine semi-gradually. But either way, once that flour has been mixed in, we will set that aside, and we'll add a pinch of salt to our white. And then we'll take a clean whisk, and we will whip our egg white into soft peaks. And I know, you'd rather do stiff peaks, but don't. All right, for this batter, we want our egg whites to be relatively supple and soft, and certainly not super stiff and dry and grainy. So I only like to whisk mine to this point. And that's it. We'll go ahead and grab a spatula, and we'll transfer our yolk mixture into our whites, and then fold it together until it's just combined. And please do not get too obsessed about deflating the egg whites. All right, we definitely want to use a light touch, and we don't want to deflate them intentionally, since that would be weird. But at the same time, we don't have to be ultra careful, like if we were making a souffle, since all we're really making here is kind of a foamy batter. So we'll just go ahead and fold and stir that together semi-carefully, basically just until those egg whites disappear. And when we're done, if everything's gone according to plan, our batter should look like this. And as you can see, it does. And if it does, we can head to the stove, where we have a nonstick pan with a little bit of olive oil in it, set over medium heat. And what we'll do is go ahead and spoon in our batter into any shape we want. And I decided, since these are supposed to be chili rellenos, I would try to do sort of a pepper shape. And this would be the perfect time to tell you that 1 egg will make enough batter for 1 chili relleno pancake. So what you saw me mix up was enough for 2. And then what we'll do once our bottom layer of batter has been placed down is go ahead and apply some of our sliced roasted poblano. And since this was an experiment, I wasn't exactly sure how much I was going to be able to fit in these, but I did pretty much get 1 entire pepper in this portion, but not all at once. I went ahead and grabbed my cheese, and I applied as much of that as I thought I could get away with, followed by the rest of my peppers. And because I was feeling lucky, even more cheese. And while we do have to do a little bit of slicing and dicing for this method, I still think it's easier than the classic technique. And actually, maybe easier is not the best word, since it's probably about the same amount of work. So instead, I'll just say I think this method is easier to execute perfectly. Plus, by doing them this way, we can use way, way less oil, and I think there's a lot less mess. But anyway, once I had placed over my peppers and then cheese and then peppers and then cheese, I went ahead and covered it with the top layer of batter, trying my best to retain the shape and not get it everywhere. And right here you see me testing if you can do a little fine-tuning with the spatula, which you sorta kinda can. And that's it. What we'll do at this point is pop on a lid, and we will cook this for about 3 or 4 minutes before we attempt to flip it over. And as I did, I was really hoping that surface was going to be perfect, with like no weirdness or cracks, but that was not the case. And as you can see, I did get a crack, which was a little bit whack, and that was probably caused by flipping it a little bit too early. So we should probably give that first side a little longer. But anyway, I tried to fix it as best I could, and also tried to tidy up the edges a little bit. And then I tossed the cover back on for a few more minutes to cook the other side. And you could probably do this without the cover, but that's going to help keep some of that heat and steam in, to maybe cook that batter a little faster. And that's it. I uncovered it, and flipped it over to see how we did on the other side, which I thought looked very cool, with some of those cubes of cheese browning up nicely. And I was thinking of presenting this side up, and probably should have, but I am nothing if not stubborn. So I flipped it back over to the original top side, which I thought looked more like a chili relleno. And then once I was pretty sure my cheese inside was nice and melty, and my batter was cooked through, I went ahead and placed that on a generous serving of our sauce, and then proceeded to garnish it with absolutely nothing. Alright, I guess if you wanted to, you could sprinkle on some chopped cilantro, but personally I think less is more here, and I believe when you bite in you'll understand. So I grabbed a fork and went in for a taste, and I was absolutely thrilled with how this came out. I mean, it tasted and felt exactly like a chili relleno, which is not surprising since we use the exact same ingredients. But with a real chili relleno, the cheese is inside the pepper and not touching the batter, so my big fear was that the texture was going to be all off, but you know what, it really wasn't. And then I also had the same fear about slicing up the pepper instead of leaving it in larger pieces, but that was not a problem either. And not only did it taste exactly the same, but I think it's easier to eat, since we don't have to worry about trying to eat around that seed pod and stem. Not to mention, sometimes the batter can slide off the pepper. So like I said, I really thought this worked very, very well. And as far as the proportions between the pepper and the cheese and the batter, I thought they were virtually identical to the traditional method. And believe me, not to brag, but I've eaten a lot of chili rellenos in my day. Whoops. See, even after eating as many as I have, I'm still working on my technique. And by the way, if you want to serve this wet, as they say, and ladle the sauce over the top, that is certainly your prerogative. And that's how a lot of people do enjoy them. But I am a sauce underneath guy from way back. Speaking of which, I decided right here I needed to ladle on a little more. But anyway, that's it. What I'm calling chili relleno pancake. Because I couldn't think of a better name. So if you think of something better, please pass it along. But no matter what we call these, if you love actual chili rellenos as much as me, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.